Have you ever woken up and your body won't move? Last night I did, and there was something standing at the edge of my bed, something that shouldn't exist, and it was watching me. I grew up in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, a place most Americans only know because of the Mothman sightings back in the 1960 seconds. For locals, the legend is just part of the landscape, another weird story tied to an old river town. But for me, Point Pleasant became the place where I learned something far worse than the Mothman existed. Something that didn't fly or stalk bridges or warn about disasters. Something that stood perfectly still. I'm talking about the Shadow Man. I didn't used to believe in anything supernatural. My life was normal enough. I worked at a small warehouse distribution center on the edge of town, trying to save enough money to move to Columbus. My mom had died the year before, and the silence of our old house became unbearable. Yet I stayed because I couldn't bring myself to sell it. Not yet. It was the only place that still smelled faintly like her lavender detergent. My therapist told me the vivid nightmares I'd been having were tied to grief. Sleep paralysis, she said. Your mind wakes up, but your body doesn't. It sounded scientific enough. But what happened to me went beyond nightmares. It started on a Tuesday night in September. I had been reorganizing the attic, going through my mother's old journals, her faded Polaroids, the newspaper clippings she'd saved about the Silver Bridge collapse in 1967. She'd been a child then, but she never forgot the panic of that winter, the bodies pulled from the Ohio River, the way her father refused to cross any steel suspension bridge for decades afterward. Point Pleasant carried trauma like a shadow. Maybe that's why the thing found me there. I fell asleep close to midnight, exhausted, the attic dust still clinging to my shirt. At some point I woke up, or thought I woke up. The room was dim, lit only by the orange glow of the street lamp outside my window. I could see everything. The dresser, the half-open closet, the old quilt at the edge of my bed. But I couldn't move. My chest felt pinned beneath a slab of concrete. I tried to call out, but my throat refused to work. That was when I noticed the shape in the corner. At first it looked like a shadow cast by the dresser, tall and narrow. But the longer I stared, the more I realized it wasn't connected to anything. It wasn't cast by light at all. It was standing, watching. The shape stretched from floor to ceiling, humanoid, but wrong, too thin, too elongated. I couldn't make out any features, but I felt its attention like a cold hand pressed against my skin. Time didn't pass normally in that state. Seconds twisted into stringy strands of panic. I felt something pressure, like invisible fingertips crawl up my ribs. Then, as if someone had flipped a switch, I could move again. I bolted upright, gasping, drenched in sweat. The corner was empty. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, I convinced myself it had been just like the doctor said, sleep paralysis, a hallucination, a chemical misfire in a stressed-out brain. That explanation held until the next night. This time, I hadn't even been asleep long when it happened. Paralysis snapped down my body like a trap. And there he was again, closer, maybe 6 feet from the bed. The darkness around him looked denser than the rest of the room, like he wasn't just a shadow, but the absence of light itself. I felt something cold drip down my throat, even though my mouth was dry. He didn't move. He didn't breathe. But I felt him, the way you feel someone standing behind you before you turn around. I remember thinking, he's learning. He's watching how long I can stay afraid. When I snapped awake, my heart hammered so hard, it made my vision swim. I went to work the next morning feeling wired and nauseous. My boss pulled me aside to ask if I needed a day off. I lied and said I was fine, but I wasn't. Every night, the paralysis hit earlier, and every night, he was a little closer. By the fourth night, he stood at the foot of my bed. I could almost see the outline of his head tilted toward me, like he was studying my face. The room felt colder in his presence, as if heat simply didn't exist near him. I could hear something this time, a faint static, like the buzzing you get when an old box fan tries to turn on but can't. My body screamed internally. My lungs felt tight. My mind clawed for any way out. In the middle of that frozen terror, something strange happened. I smelled lavender, my mom's detergent. Her scent filled the air, soft and warm. And for a second, I felt comforted, protected. Then I realized the smell came from behind the shadow man. Not from him, from something else, something that hated him. When I regained movement, I practically threw myself off the bed. My legs buckled and I crawled toward the hallway light, flicking every switch I could reach. I didn't sleep again until morning. I decided to look for answers the only place Point Pleasant kept them, the local museum. Everyone visited the Mothman Museum at some point. Most tourists treated it like a quirky roadside attraction. But behind the novelty merch and statues were long-forgotten local stories, some older than the bridge collapse, older even than the town itself. The curator, an older guy named Leonard, recognized me from school. When I mentioned I'd been experiencing sleep paralysis, his expression shifted, not surprised, but careful. "You seen anything else?" he asked. "Shadows? People who aren't there?" His tone told me he already knew the answer. I forced myself to say it. "Something stands in my room." Leonard nodded slowly. Then he told me about a lesser-known part of Point Pleasant legend, something even locals didn't talk about anymore. During the chaos after the Silver Bridge collapse, rescue workers claimed to see a tall, dark figure near the riverbank, never close, always watching. At least 5 different men reported it independently. They described him the same way every time, taller than any man, thin like someone stretched him, face impossible to see. Newspapers never printed the accounts, but the museum kept them in their archives. "Some say he shows up around grief," Leonard said. "When the boundary between waking and sleeping thins. When shadows stick to a person." My stomach twisted. "So what is he? What is he? What is he, Faye?" "No one knows," he replied. "Just that he gets closer the more you notice him." I left the museum feeling sick, carrying a manila folder of copied reports under my arm. That night I tried something different. I stayed up, sitting in bed with every lamp in the house turned on. Around 3 a.m., exhaustion finally won. My chin dropped to my chest. Darkness swallowed the room instantly. Even though the lamps were still lit, paralysis slammed into me, and he was right beside my bed, inches away. If he had a face, it was nearly touching mine. The static roar filled my skull, vibrating through my teeth. I felt heat drain out of my body like blood from a cut. I don't know how long he stood there. My eyes streamed tears because I couldn't blink. Then, through the suffocating dread, the lavender scent returned stronger than before. Warmth wrapped around me, soft and familiar, like someone placing a blanket over my shoulders. And for the first time, the shadow man moved. He recoiled not far, only a step, but enough for me to feel the shift in the air. Enough for me to understand something I wasn't supposed to know. He wasn't the only thing in the room. The next morning, I woke up on top of the sheets, trembling from head to toe. I barely remembered falling asleep, only the cold he brought and the warmth that pushed him back. For a few minutes, I sat there, shaking, trying to convince myself I hadn't lost my mind. But then I smelled it again, faint, lingering in the fabric of my pillow. Lavender. My mother had always said that scent protected her. When I was a kid, she'd sprinkle lavender water in my bedroom after nightmares and tell me, "Nothing dark likes the smell of what's loved." At the time, it sounded like one of those gentle lies parents tell their children. Now, I wasn't so sure. I took the copied reports from the museum and laid them across the kitchen table. 5 men, 5 rescue workers from the Silver Bridge collapse had written nearly identical accounts. A tall shadow along the river, never speaking, never touching, just watching. One of the men, a diver named Harold Kemp, described collapsing on his couch days later after being overwhelmed by sleep paralysis. He wrote that the shadow approached him each night until he moved to a relative's house in Kentucky. After that, the visit stopped. I reread that line about 20 times. If he could escape it, maybe I could too. But how do you outrun something that appears inside your sleep? I couldn't focus at work. Every forklift beep sounded like the static hum I'd heard in the paralysis. Every dark corner made my skin crawl. I kept thinking about my mom, how her scent felt like a shield, how she died in the very room the shadow man visited. By the time my shift ended, I'd made a decision I wasn't proud of. I went back to the museum. Leonard wasn't there, but another volunteer let me into the archives room upstairs. I searched through boxes of local lore, newspaper clippings, and handwritten notes. Then I found something that made my heart stop. A journal page, yellowed with age, written by a woman named Marietta Collins in 1969. She claimed her husband, who survived the bridge collapse, was followed by a tall shadow for months afterward. She wrote, "It stands in the corner when he sleeps. When he cannot move, I smell flowers, lavender, as if something tries to keep it away." My breath left me. Someone else had smelled it. Someone else had felt the warmth. I took a photo of the page, tucked the folder back where I found it, and left before I could talk myself out of what I planned next. That night, I didn't turn the lights on. I didn't try to stay awake. I needed to understand what was happening and why. I lay in bed with the room dark and silent, lavender oil dabbed lightly onto my wrists. My heart pounded as I waited for sleep to drag me under. It didn't take long. Paralysis hit me hard, locking my limbs like they'd been welded to the mattress. My breath froze in my lungs, and the shadow man stood at my bedside, close enough that I felt the cold radiating off him like leaking refrigerant. The static sound rattled in my skull again. This time, I forced myself to look directly at him, even though every cell in my body screamed not to. The darkness around him swirled like smoke. His outline flickered, stretching, shrinking, twitching, out of rhythm with anything human. I wanted to shut my eyes, but couldn't. Then I felt the warmth bloom gentle at first, then stronger, rolling through my chest like a slow breath. Lavender filled the air, thick and comforting, and the shadow man shrank back, not far, but enough that I realized something. He wasn't the threat I'd assumed. He was reacting to something else, to her. The warmth intensified until it felt like hands resting on my shoulders. My mother's hands. I didn't see her. Nothing appeared in the room except him, but I felt her. For the first time since she died, I felt her presence, unmistakable and steady. I tried to speak, but my mouth wouldn't move. My thoughts, though those felt loud. Why is he here? What does he want with me? The shadow man's shape twitched, glitching like a corrupted video frame. The static grew louder. I realized something horrifying. He wasn't inching closer each night because he wanted to hurt me. He was inching closer because something else was pulling me away from him. Something he feared losing track of. He wasn't hunting me. He was warning me. The warmth surged again, and suddenly the shadow man's form stretched tall, impossibly tall, filling the corner to the ceiling. For a heartbeat, I saw something within him, like the silhouette of dozens of faces shifting inside the void. Not screaming, not crying, observing. Then the warmth snapped back, hard, like a rubber band. The paralysis broke instantly. I shot up, gasping so violently I nearly vomited. The room was empty. My wrists still smelled like lavender. But a cold spot remained on the floor where he'd stood so cold it made frost on the wood. My mind raced through everything I'd seen, everything I'd felt. The reports, the sightings, the warnings, and the realization hit me all at once. The shadow man wasn't tied to death. He was tied to trauma, collective trauma, the Silver Bridge collapse, the nightmares that haunted survivors. My mother's sleepless nights after Dad left. My own grief after losing her. He wasn't a monster. He was a witness, a presence that appeared where suffering pooled. Not to cause it, just to stand in it, like a shadow cast by the darkest parts of human memory. And the lavender, that wasn't a shield against him. It was a shield against the grief that drew him. My mother wasn't protecting me from a creature. She was protecting me from drowning in the same sorrow that consumed her. Once I understood that, something inside me loosened. I finally cried, really cried, for the first time since the funeral. I stayed awake until sunrise, letting every memory of my mother wash over me. For the first night in weeks, when I finally slept again, I didn't see him. I didn't feel the paralysis. I didn't hear the static. The corner of my room stayed empty. Days passed, then a week. Then two, no sign of him. Eventually, I worked up the courage to visit the riverbank near where the Silver Bridge once stood. The water moved slow and muddy, carrying decades of history beneath its surface. I stood there a long time, breathing in the quiet, and for a moment, just a moment, I felt a cold brush behind me. Not threatening, not watching, just acknowledging. A witness, recognizing another witness. When I turned around, nothing was there. But I knew the truth now. Shadows don't always follow us to hurt us. Sometimes they follow to remind us of what we've survived. And sometimes, if you're lucky, something loved walks beside you to keep the darkness from getting too close. I left Point Pleasant a month later. But even now, in my new apartment in Columbus, I sometimes wake in the middle of the night and glance toward the corner of the room. It's always empty, but every once in a while, I smell lavender, and that's enough. I never believed in recurring nightmares, not in the supernatural sense. My therapist used to tell me that repetition is the mind's way of processing something unresolved. But whatever happened to me last winter in Duluth, Minnesota, wasn't psychological. It wasn't symbolic. It was real. Duluth sits on the edge of Lake Superior, the largest freshwater lake in the world, a place with a long, cold history of shipwrecks and disappearances. You grow up hearing about the witch tree, about the native stories of spirits warning sailors of storms, and of course, the tragic sinking of the SS Edmund Fitzgerald in 1975. Still sung about in old bars near the harbor. People call this place haunted, but they mean it metaphorically. I learned the hard way that some things here truly linger. My name is Daniel, and last year I moved to Duluth because of a job transfer. I work as a night dispatcher for a shipping company near the port. It's boring, repetitive work, the kind of job where your mind wanders, whether you want it to or not. I came here to reset my life after my marriage fell apart. My ex-wife told me I had a habit of running from things. Maybe she was right, because I ran all the way to a town that freezes 9 months of the year. The apartment I found was cheap, old, and drafty. The landlord said it used to belong to a retired fisherman who passed away a few years back. He died peacefully, she said, in his sleep. She said it like that detail should comfort me. At first, everything felt normal enough. I worked nights, slept days, kept to myself. But after a month, I started having sleep paralysis. I'd had it once or twice in my life before, but never like this. The first time, I woke up unable to move, staring across my small bedroom at the corner near the closet. Something sat there. At first, I thought it was a pile of clothes or a shadow cast by my coat hanging on the hook, but then I realized the shape wasn't connected to anything. It was wrong, crooked, twisted slightly, as if uncomfortable in its own existence. A figure, sitting, watching. It didn't move. It didn't breathe. I could only see its outline, but not its features. When the paralysis broke, I jolted up, and the figure was gone. I told myself it was a hallucination, a side effect of stress, lack of sunlight, and too much caffeine working night shifts. But the next afternoon, it happened again. Same paralysis, same inability to scream, same figure, only closer. Last time it sat in the corner. This time, it sat halfway across the room, near the foot of my bed. The shape was clearer now. Shoulders too narrow, head tilted slightly forward, legs drawn up as if crouched. My heartbeat thudded so loudly I could hear it vibrating in my ears. When I snapped out of it, I turned every light on and didn't sleep the rest of the night. I convinced myself it was fine. Just stress. Just my brain misfiring. I tried melatonin. I tried tea. I tried sleep meditations. Nothing helped. On the third night, the figure sat at the end of my bed. It wasn't blurry anymore. It had shape, weight, presence. I still couldn't see a face, but it was hunched forward, its long arms wrapped around its knees. Its head twitched slightly, like someone holding back a sob or shivering. The room felt cold, as if the air itself thickened around me. I could hear something this time, a faint scratching, soft but constant, like nails dragging slowly across wood. It wasn't coming from the thing. It was coming from the floor beneath it, as if it were moving something aside, scraping something open. When the paralysis released me, I flew out of bed so fast I slammed into the dresser. My knees buckled, and I lay there shaking until the sun rose. I called in sick that night. I couldn't bring myself to sleep. The next day, I went to the Lake Superior Maritime Visitor Center, hoping distracting myself with local history might ground me. Inside, there were exhibits about the storms, the shipwrecks, and the men who died working the lakes. One plaque caught my eye. Stories collected from sailors in the early 1900s about the Crouched Watcher, a shadowy figure said to appear during long voyages across Superior. Sailors claimed it sat hunched in the corners of cabins during their sleep. Most dismissed it as exhaustion. Others swore it was a warning of misfortune. The final line of the plaque stuck with me. Those who saw the watcher reported it returned each night, sitting closer each time until the voyage ended or tragedy struck. A volunteer saw me reading and chuckled under his breath. "Old ghost stories," he said. "Every town has some." But his smile didn't reach his eyes. Something about the story got under my skin. I went home with a stack of old library books about Great Lakes folklore. That night, before trying to sleep, I pushed my bed flush against the wall, turned on the bedside lamp, and left the TV playing quietly. I lay there, heart pounding, praying nothing would happen. It didn't matter. The paralysis came anyway, sudden, heavy, absolute. This time, the figure wasn't sitting at the foot of my bed. It was standing directly beside me. Its long frame loomed over my chest, bent slightly at the waist. Its head hung down, as if studying my face. I still couldn't see features, just darkness, deep and unnatural, like a hole in reality. My lungs burned. I couldn't draw breath. I felt something cold drip onto my cheek. Thick. I couldn't turn my head, but I sensed the figure was dripping onto me. The scratching noise returned louder now. Close, under my bed. Something was under me, tapping, scraping, pushing against the mattress. When I finally broke free, I screamed. I must have screamed for minutes. My throat hurt afterward. Sleep was no longer an option. I left the apartment and walked for hours along the frozen harbor, trying to breathe, trying to think. I ended up at a bar near the canal. The bartender, a woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair, noticed my shaking hands. "You look like someone who saw a ghost," she said half-jokingly. I don't know why, but I told her everything. Not the supernatural parts, just that I was having terrifying sleep paralysis. Her expression shifted from playful to serious. She leaned in. "The man who lived in your place before you," she said quietly. "The fisherman. He complained of the same thing. She told me he'd claimed a crouched figure, watched him at night. That it got closer every time. That he tried blessing the place, burning sage, even sleeping with the lights on. Nothing helped. He said it followed him across the lakes," she whispered. "Started when he survived a storm out on Superior that killed 2 deckhands. He said something came back with him." My stomach twisted. Did he ever describe it standing next to him? She paused. "He said that was the last thing he saw." I stared at her. "Before he died in his sleep?" Her voice dropped to a hush. "Honey, he didn't die peacefully. The landlord tells people that, so they'll still rent the place." She placed a shaky hand on the counter. "He died trying to crawl out of his bedroom window. They found him halfway through it. I left without finishing my drink. That night, I didn't even go home. I slept in my car near the edge of the lake. But sleep found me anyway. Paralysis hit while I was half upright in the driver's seat. The figure didn't care where I was. It crouched outside the car at first, its silhouette framed by the frost on the glass. Then, with a horrible shifting motion, it pressed itself against the window, inches from my face. I watched its dark head tilt slowly, as if recognizing me. Then, impossibly, it passed through the glass, silent, fluid, like smoke pulled by a vacuum. It sat in the passenger seat beside me, curled unnaturally tight, spine bending in ways that made my stomach twist. I could smell something now, damp, metallic, like lake water and old rusted steel. The smell of shipwrecks. My vision blurred from sheer terror. I forced myself to think through the panic. There had to be a reason, something tying it to Duluth, to the lake, to the fishermen, to me. The scratching started again from the floor of the car, this time under my feet, scratching upward. I didn't break free. I passed out. When I came to, it was morning, and a thin layer of frost coated the inside of the windshield. But that wasn't what scared me. What scared me was the smear of wet footprints on the passenger seat, as if something had sat there with dripping feet, human feet. That was when I realized something terrifying. The figure wasn't approaching me each night because it wanted to kill me. It was approaching me because something else was trying to crawl out from beneath it. Something trapped under beds, under boats, under floors. Something that wanted out. I drove straight to the library as soon as I woke up. My nerves were shattered, my hands cold and trembling, but I knew I was running out of time. I needed answers, real ones, not folklore summaries or half-whispered bar stories. Deep in the Minnesota history section, I found a dusty binder labeled Maritime Incidents, Personal Accounts. Inside were photocopied journals from sailors, lighthouse operators, and fishermen who had worked Lake Superior for decades. Most entries were mundane weather notes, catch counts, supply logs. But I found one that made every hair on my body rise. It was from December 1975, a few weeks after the Edmund Fitzgerald sank. The writer was a deckhand named Harlan Mills, stationed on an ore boat that helped with search efforts. His handwriting grew shaky halfway through the entry. We brought up a piece of hull today. Men on board swear they saw someone hunched atop it when it surfaced. Looked like a man curled over like he'd been crushed. But when we blinked, it was gone. Lake playing tricks. Nights are worst. Sleep paralysis. Something sits in the corner of my bunk, every night closer. Scratching comes from below. Tom says spirits cling to the lake after a wreck. Says the crouched one is a watcher. Says the thing underneath is the one you don't want to meet. My blood turned to ice. A watcher. A second thing underneath. I read until my vision blurred, similar entries appearing after big wrecks or storms. Men describing a hunched shadow approaching night after night. Men describing scratching under their bunks. Men who stopped writing after a certain point. The pattern was always the same. The crouched figure wasn't the threat, it was the barrier. A sentinel, something that kept the other thing contained. Something trapped under wood, floors, boats, beds, something that clawed upward. That night, I made the worst decision of my life. I returned to my apartment. I had to understand. I had to know the truth. The moment I stepped inside, the cold hit me sharper and deeper than any Minnesota winter draft. I turned on all the lights. It didn't matter. The shadows in the corners remained darker than they should have been. I set my phone to record and placed it on the dresser. Then, I lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling, waiting for sleep to take me. It didn't take long. Paralysis slammed down on me like a sheet of concrete. My limbs locked. My breath halted. My vision tunneled. The crouched figure sat at the edge of the bed, not inches away now, but touching. Its knee pressed into the mattress near my hip. Its long arms dangled toward the floor. Its head hung low, like a drowned man's. And then I heard it, scratching, from under the bed. Aggressive now, frantic, like nails raking against wood in rapid, desperate strokes. Something was clawing upward, trying to get through. My heart thrashed against my ribs. I tried to scream, but my throat was stone. The crouched figure shifted. For the first time, it moved with intention. Slowly, painfully, its head turned toward me. Though its face was only shadow, I felt the weight of its gaze. A warning. A plea. It pressed one long finger to the mattress, right above where the scratching was coming from, as if holding something down. The scraping grew violent. The bed shook. The figure trembled, its limbs quivering with the effort. Its back arched unnaturally, stretching as if something underneath was pushing upward into its spine. My paralysis loosened just enough for a thin wheeze of breath to escape. That was all the other thing needed. The scratching exploded into a single massive thud, like something slamming its whole body upward. Wood cracked. I felt the mattress lift for a fraction of a second. Then something cold wrapped around my ankle. Not a hand, not claws, something boneless, smooth, like wet rope. It tightened and began to pull. The crouched figure reacted instantly, diving forward and gripping the edge of the bed with both hands, as if anchoring itself. I felt the tension between them. The thing beneath pulling me down, the watcher pushing down on it. For a moment, I thought the bed would split open. My body slid an inch toward the side. Then two. My ankle felt like it was being crushed. The watcher leaned closer, its shadow enveloping me, pressing me into the mattress, holding me in place, protecting me. The shuddering beneath the bed reached a peak, then stopped. Sudden. Absolute. The rope-like grip around my ankle loosened. The watcher sagged, its body slumping forward like a puppet with cut strings. My paralysis snapped. I crawled backward into the corner of the room, sobbing, gasping, staring at the bed as the shadows shifted. The watcher slowly rose to its feet. Taller now. Straighter. Its hunched shape unfurling like it had been cramped for too long. It stood there silently, facing the bed, as if making sure the thing beneath was still contained. Then it turned to me. For the first time, I felt something from it. Not fear, not malice. Exhaustion. A heavy, ancient exhaustion. I whispered, "What do you want?" It didn't move. But its head tilted slightly, not threatening, but almost sympathetic. As if it understood that I finally knew, finally saw. It stepped back, then dissolved into the dark corner of the room, its shape sinking into shadow until nothing remained. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. At sunrise, I packed a bag and left Duluth without a word to my landlord. I didn't break my lease. I didn't even take all my clothes. I drove south for hours until the lake was far behind me. In a motel outside Minneapolis, I checked my phone. The recording was still running. My hands shook as I played it back. For the first few minutes, there was nothing but the sound of sheets rustling. Then came the scratching. Loud. Violent, exactly as I'd heard it. My breath hitched as the audio intensified. The bed thumped. Something snarled a wet, guttural sound like a person drowning while trying to scream. Then another sound layered beneath it, a deep, sustained hum, low and resonant, like a foghorn buried underwater. The watcher, holding it back. The recording ended abruptly with my own gasp as I broke free. I deleted it. I don't need reminders. I already know the truth. Sleep paralysis doesn't always come from the mind. Sometimes it's something older, something bound to a place. Something that uses paralysis to keep you still while it fights off something worse. I still dream of the watcher sometimes. Not the hunched version, the tall, straight one. The one that saved me at its own cost. And every once in a while, When I wake in the early hours before dawn, I freeze for a moment and listen, just to be sure there's no scratching under the bed. So far, there hasn't been. But I know this: if I ever hear it again, I won't wait for it to get closer. I'll run, even if the watcher can't follow, even if the thing underneath can. Because in Duluth, on the edge of Lake Superior, I learned one horrifying truth. The figure was never coming for me. It was coming for the thing, already trying to crawl out.